It's sometimes been hard to tell if the amount of danger our democracy in has gotten through to the public at large. We're seeing new evidence Americans understand that they are rightly concerned. As we mentioned, that new NBC News poll released over the weekend found that voters rank threats to democracy as the #1 most important issue facing the country. And while all this attention now focused on safeguarding American democracy, it's perhaps more important than ever to know who is working to, well, undermine it. Leonard Leo is one of those people, I think it's fair to say. He's the most powerful person in the country you have likely never heard of.
The idea was really to create a pipeline that started in law school and then glided into the legal profession by building a network or infrastructure of people around the country who could influence the major power centers of our legal culture.
And we've been very successful. And the world we have today is partly born of their success, largely born of his success. As the New York Times reports, that guy who's creating that pipeline now has $1.6 billion at his disposal to use however he likes. Ken Volg is a reporter for the New York Times, one of the reporters who broke that story, and he joins me now. Ken, I read this story 2 or 3 times when it was published this morning because I just never encountered anything like it. So just describe to us who donated this money and how.
Yeah, it was a very unusual transaction, Chris, the likes of which I have not seen in my years of covering money and politics, wherein this donor, his name is Barry Seid, he was the owner, complete owner of a electrical device manufacturing company. He donated 100% of the shares of that company to a new nonprofit, a dark money nonprofit that Leonard Leo set up, which then took custody of the company essentially and sold the company to another company, the proceeds of which were about $1.6 billion. And so the nonprofit was able to essentially reap the proceeds of that without paying capital gains taxes, which he would have had to have paid if he would have sold the company directly and then tried to donate the money to this new nonprofit. So it gave them this really huge and unprecedented kitty to an unknown nonprofit group, but that is part of a network, a larger network of groups that Leonard Leo has formed and cultivated in the last few years to try to influence not just the judiciary, but politics in a broader way, pushing for conservative issues on things, pushing for the conservative stance on issues like voting rules, abortion rights, fighting efforts to combat climate change. So it really puts him at the center, a kingmaker, as we termed it in our story.
Just to be clear, have you ever encountered a transaction of this nature before?
So we have seen instances where major donors have given shares of companies, right, not usually companies they own, but companies where a lot of money worth of shares, and then the nonprofit can do with it what it wants. And some of the same tax implications are in play there, but never a company, a full company, large company being donated to a nonprofit, no.
And this happened in March of 2021, right? Like would this have been public if you and other reporters didn't sniff this out? Like how did you find out about it? How do we know about it?
No, it would not have been public. These groups, they're dark money groups. They're called that for a reason. They don't have to report a lot of information about don't have to report any information about their donors. They don't have to report much information about their finances, including how they spend the money. And so what this group did report on its mandatory tax filings, all nonprofits have to release public tax filings. It reported that it received 100% of the shares of a company. It didn't identify what the company was, and then that it reaped $1.6 billion from selling the shares of the company. And so we, through our reporting, were able to determine what that company was and who the owner was, and a little bit more about Leonard Leo's relationship with this donor, the owner of the company.
And just to be clear again, now this money is sitting there presumably and can be used, again, thanks to basically the jurisprudence that came out of Citizens United and subsequent holdings by this court, to do whatever you want in any kind of political campaign or in a essentially entirely unregulated fashion.
Yeah, I mean, there are some rules that say that these nonprofit groups have to be engaged primarily in social welfare activities. But what that means, both what social welfare activities means and what primarily means, are very much open to interpretation. And smart political lawyers, including those that are paid by this group, who Leonard Leo works with closely, these lawyers have found ways to spend a lot of money on things that look to, from the lay perspective, like they're just political advertising or political advocacy.
And it is all, we should say, essentially tax subsidized, right? I mean, there's an enormous tax savings here, but these are essentially subsidized by the federal government, which does not tax them. They are tax exempt organizations.
Yeah, that's right. And there are certainly criticisms of, which we include in our story, of transactions like this as allowing wealthy folks to save money on taxes and spend more money influencing the political process. I should also say that that is one of the real strengths of Leonard Leo, is that it's not just that he has been so sophisticated in shaping the federal judiciary and other aspects of the conservative movement. It's that he, over the years, because of his effectiveness, has cultivated this network of donors like this Barry Side guy, who are willing to give him huge sums of money, as we see in this transaction, that further enhance his power.
Well, I would just say, from a small d Democratic perspective, $1.6 billion should buy a tremendous amount of scrutiny. Ken Vogel, thank you very much.
Pleasure.